Thank you, Cheryl. All right, everyone. It is now 10 o'clock. Good morning. I am Aaron Blumberg, Swiftland's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Successfully Supervising People, Conflict Resolution. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Claudia Monte. Claudia Monte founded CAM Consulting Group, LLC as a full-service management consulting and training firm in 1993 to assist organizations and their most important asset, people, achieve success. Since then, she has been privileged to deliver professional development programs to clients across the country in the library, legal, nonprofit, public, and private sectors. Claudia specializes in coaching individuals to expand their emotional intelligence in the various facets of their personal and professional lives. Prior to starting her firm, she held management, sales, training, and marketing positions with 3 major corporations. She received her degree from Widener University and is an adjunct instructor for Florida Southwestern State College. Please welcome Claudia and enjoy her webinar this morning. Claudia?
Well, thank you, Aaron, for that nice introduction. And also, let's say welcome to Connie, our wonderful interpreter, who has been with me through all of the webinars so far. I just would like to get a feel from everybody. Can you hear me okay? Coming through clearly? Somebody tell me yes or no. Yes, yes. So I'm seeing several yeses, so I'm going to say that we are good to go. So, having seen that, I welcome those of you who are joining me for the first time, and I am welcoming back, those of you who are joining me for the last webinar in our series. We have had some interesting conversations, I might say, over our past sessions, and I hope that today you'll find the same thing will happen as we look at today's topic, which really has to deal with conflict resolution. How do we manage differences constructively, problem resolution? You can refer to it any way that you would like. But at the essence, it just seems that no matter what, when it comes to dealing with people, we could put two people in an empty room, and at some point, there are going to be differences. There's going to be some challenges. There are going to be unique points of view. And so in order to keep people moving forward, which is always the goal, we have to figure out how do we manage this a little bit more constructively than maybe what we've done in the past, and consequently learn, how to handle a variety of situations that tend to come our way. So what we have done, and this is for the benefit of everybody, to give you an idea of what we've accomplished so far, is we have had the 3 sessions on introducing situational leadership and practicing emotional intelligence and understanding performance management, all of which have brought us to this morning's session, which is session 4 on managing differences constructively. What is still planned to come, and I do hope the majority of you will be able to join me, if not all of you, on session 5, which is a classroom setting on coaching for positive outcomes. And what we will be doing in that session is really a compilation of a lot of things, but also taking it to another level as to how do we get people really to, and you hear the term stretch in coaching, how do we get people to stretch a bit more, all right, to reach the potential? Because so much of it is about helping individuals become stronger, recognize their talents, and help them improve in the areas that do need some attention. So in that session, we will be doing a lot of case study work, situational work, and I also think it'd be very good for you to have some good conversation with each other where you can literally talk to each other versus just chat. And along with the exercises that we can do, which will be very experiential and relevant, and relevant based. So please keep that in mind and look at your calendars and see if we can finally get to meet in person, versus just chatting in this format that's here. So what I am curious, for those of you who have been with me, through the 3 previous, and for those who are new, you're going to see we're going to do a real quick review because everything is interrelated. All of the topics kind of keep building upon each other. But for those of you that have been with me through the previous sessions, What have you applied? I mean, what has helped you? What have, just real quickly, a situation where you have found the skills that we've talked about have helped you manage it a bit constructively, or a bit more constructively, let's put it that way. Let's see, it looks like Jamie is typing. Right, John is saying, thinking about ways to delegate to library staff. Yes, delegation is a skill in and of itself. And you'll see as we do the quick review on situational leadership, you know, it it's a wonderful skill. It's a way to develop individuals, but you have to really know their level, of expertise so you can delegate and delegate wisely to them. Um, I can't see who wrote this one here. Um, oh, Jamie just had a staff meeting and tried to give them more power to make decisions. Empowerment is very motivational. And sometimes, and when you are the supervisor or the manager, you almost have to tell them that they're empowered to do this. So, in that ability and sharing that and actually giving them permission to do this, because a lot of times people feel they can't, um, gives people that sense that they can contribute and could contribute more fully. Information about the system, and what's going on at various levels is really key because everybody plays a critical role in making the library work. So the more information that you can share, remember, knowledge is power. More information that you can share, more that people will take some ownership and begin to understand what their role is in the big picture, not necessarily just performing in a vacuum. All right, so let me hear what Cheryl has to say, and then we're going to move on from that. But I'm so glad, all right, that you're seeing um, some benefit to the learning here. Cheryl says, learning how to be the middle person between my staff and the branch manager. For those of you who are supervisors and departmental managers, you know what? You are have a tough job because you are the middle managers, and you get feedback that comes to you from the bottom up. You get feedback that comes top down, and somehow you have to keep everything going. There's actually a term, it's called leading from the middle, and that's really what you do, uh, because you are your staff's best advocate, and you're there to advocate on their behalf. And so how you deliver that feedback and advocate for them, goes a long way in building constructive relationships and a sense of teamwork, among all entities within the libraries. So I'm so happy to read, right, that you're finding some benefit and actually being able to apply some of the principles that we've been talking about. So for everybody's benefit, um, new visitors or those who have been here before, just want to do a quick review of what we've covered in the past sessions. And the basic premise, and this is where we always start, is situational leadership. And the message of situational leadership, is that there really is no one size fits all style of management. Three key words always: you have to know your audience. And in this case, you really need to know your team and the individuals that you supervise. Because with that knowledge is going to drive the appropriate leadership style, to use with them that's going to allow them to be successful. So in other words, if you have somebody who is development level 1, and those are the arrows at the bottom of the screen, development level 1 would be your new hire, or think about anything that has the word new in front of it. You're implementing new policies, new procedures, new systems. Then your style becomes what's known as the directing style. So where you see S1, S2, they intersect with the development 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the bottom of the screen. And in your directing style, you really are telling people what needs to be done because they've never done it before. And so as you direct their efforts, your feedback and your monitoring is going to be a lot more close because, again, they've never done it before. However, there should be continual growth. So as people get comfortable and they develop across the scale, and they get into that second level, they should now know how to do the basics of the job. They may still need some additional coaching, training in order to fully meet expectations. And that's how your style begins to shift now to more of a coaching style. So as you see, you really are coming up the curve. And as with their growth, your style is growing with them. So that as you get to the second half of the equation on the left style, you see where now it's becoming more supportive. And with supportive style, your communication level becomes more two-way. Because at the third level, they really should know how to do their job. And as they know how to do their job, the basics of the job, we start to add additional responsibilities. But there should be a comfort level at this point that's been evolving, where now it's mutual conversation between two parties, between you and between your staff or team. Now, until finally you reach that fourth stage, which is called the delegating stage. And in that stage, you really do have one or two individuals who are at that fourth development level who can keep the department running in your absence. You could turn over projects to them and know that they're going to run with the entire project. So as they grow, your style grows too. And this is really key when it comes to delegation, because if you had somebody who was at development level 1, brand new to your department, brand new even to the library, and you hand them a project without a lot of specifics, and use the delegation style, which is situational level 4, with somebody who's development level 1, what's the result going to be? If you're using level 4 style, like true delegation, I'm just going to turn over this major project to somebody who's brand new, what's the result going to be? Exactly right. It's going to be overwhelming, and you're setting them up to fail, and that's not fair. Right? Let's see another one. There's going to be frustration, and see how very quickly we're going to demotivate and undermine their confidence level when we want to maintain enthusiasm of new people coming in. Conversely, if you have incredibly strong talent and you have a team where several people are at level 3 and level 4, and you are keeping your style at level 1, in other words, you're using the directing style, on those who are at level 3 and 4, what are you now guilty of? What type of manager have you become? You are now the classic micromanager. And at that point, you're going to create the same level of frustration, and you're going to turn people off because you're not showing enough faith in their ability to do the job. So situational leadership, is a very valuable model that lays a very good foundation, that helps you, really step back and get to know your people, what do they need from you, and consequently in your role be able to meet those expectations and help them meet the expectations of their performance too in doing that. Well, how you go about that is what's really key, and that's where emotional intelligence came into this. There is an excellent book, and I put it on today's reference. It's called Primal Leadership, by Daniel Goleman, who also wrote, Emotional Intelligence, which has become the basic principles of that. And in Primal Leadership, it really does mention that, the emotions, leadership is emotional driven. And it really is the first thing. If we create that sense of enthusiasm, we reach out to people's emotions, about your vision, where you want to lead them, well, then you have a better chance that people will follow. If your style is such that it doesn't have any empathy for people, if it is not built upon developing good relationships, well, then the odds are, regardless of how smart you are or how technically savvy you are, you're not going to have a good manager-supervisor relationship with the individuals that you are working with. And so emotional intelligence are really very critical, to success. And today, as we talk about managing differences constructively, we're going to see how much emotion plays whenever there are differences of opinion or there is conflict. Because as human beings, do we lead first with emotion or do we lead first with logic? Oh, Jamie, you got it. You got emotion. Emotion, emotion, emotion. We are overwhelmingly emotional human beings. And even physiologically, the way that we are wired. You should look at the PowerPoint and you see the brain there. Our emotions come in at the base of our spine, and it travels through our limbic system. And if you look at that, look how big that is before it ever gets to the cognitive, which is in the front part of our brain. And so as a result, Cheryl, you said it should be logic, but emotion usually takes over because emotion is so large for us. And in our brain, we have this ability to filter. When we work well with the filtering system, then we allow the logic to take over. When we don't manage our filtering system, here's self-management, all right, well then emotion runs rampant. And as it runs rampant, it floods our cognitive, and then everything becomes raw. And when everything becomes raw, we're not thinking. What comes out of our mouths is not what should come out of our mouths, and consequently the behavior, all right, that follows is not at all the way it should be. And many times we don't realize that until after something has occurred, and the next day or in a couple hours we're in the car driving home thinking, that really could have been handled a little bit better. Because at that point, we have stepped back, we've taken a deep breath, and the flood that really does occur, over our brains, the emotional part of our brains is beginning to recede, and as logic comes in now, we are able to step back and see how we can handle things a little bit differently. So emotional intelligence is really very, very critical, right, to not only managing situations with others, quite frankly, it always starts with ourselves. So those personal competencies are intrapersonal within, uh, our self-awareness, our level of confidence, our level of credibility. And you'll see as we talk a little bit more this morning, it is about the self-talk and those messages we send to ourselves and how we need to shift them, in difficult situations in order to better manage our emotions, to generate some empathy, as we move into the social competencies about the best approaches to take in handling situations, issues that occur, in order to solve the problem and still maintain the relationship. So always remember, we do have problems to solve. There will always be differences. There are always going to be conflicts. But at the end of the day, we want to resolve them and still maintain the relationship. And there's the big role that emotional intelligence plays as we balance that interconnection between our IQ, our cognitive intelligences, along with our EQ or EI, emotional intelligence, and our personality, and the strengths of our personalities, and also those areas that many times we need to keep working on in order to get better, in dealing with people. So that topic led to our third topic, which was performance management. And performance management is really the continuum of communication that we have with the individuals, under within our teams that allow them to see how they are meeting the expectations that are set, that are critical for the success of their professional development, but also for the success of the team. So, and it's continuing. So it's more than just writing the performance review, which may be annually or semi-annually. That form should really just be the summary of all these conversations that we have on an ongoing basis. So it really is a continuum. That's the best way I could say it, of communication that's ongoing, where expectations are set, feedback is given against them, and so the feedback, if it's positive feedback, then and they're meeting the expectations, well then how do we continually get them to move forward? If the feedback is such in a constructive way that they need to improve, well then how do we coach them, all right, towards improvement, and actually put them on a corrective plan so that they continually can meet the expectations? And so that monitoring piece goes back to situational leadership, because depending upon where they are in their development level, it's going to say how often that we really do need to talk and follow up, and have these conversations with them. So it really is, at the end, I really want everybody to walk away and think about performance management as so much more than just writing that performance, doing the performance appraisal or completing that form that most people don't like to do, but is necessary for documentation, but really should result in the best conversation you have with somebody that works for you all year long. So that is, these topics here, have really brought us to where we are today, because at the end of the day, people are still people. And what did we say that people bring with them every day when they show up for work? That was one of my first questions to you when we began this series. What do people bring along with them? And here come attitudes, the big A word. Oh, their personal life. Yes, we have 24 hours in a day. Jan Wilson, their life, they're bringing expectations. Some expectations that are realistic, some that may not be too realistic. Nicole, let's see what it is that you have to say. And on the positive side, they bring their knowledge, they bring their skills, they bring their expertise. So there is, as people walk in the door, there is such diversity as to what people bring along with them. But it really is life that comes in. And so with that, in trying to get all these diverse personalities to work together as a team, at times it can be challenging. It's incredibly rewarding, but boy, it can be challenging sometimes, just knowing that we're dealing with the essence of people. So what I'm curious about, all right, let's take a look at the next slide and see where everybody's headset is about how we even approach conflict. And we hear that word, and how can we resolve it? So let's look at some fact or fiction around conflict. First one, conflict is inherently bad and unhealthy. What do you think, true or false? False, 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 and a false. So it looks like we have overwhelming false. And it is false. Why? Oh, it can promote growth. It can bring new ideas. Yes, you're going to see as we continue with this, there is constructive conflict and there is destructive conflict. So what you're looking at right now, where you say it's false, yes, it is. You're really honing in on what is called constructive conflict, because out of that, boy, we can learn a lot. We can help people to understand each other. And you know what? We can't solve any problems if we don't even know that they exist. All right, number 2, conflict doesn't occur that often in the workplace. True or false? Oh, false, 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 false. Inevitably, you put people together, differences are going to occur. And let's hope that they can be healthy differences. Number 3, most conflicts resolve themselves over time. True or false? Lots of false. I hear from David, some do, many do not. And yeah, if they're minor, a lot of people, I just will let them go. They just aren't worth the time, the energy to deal with. We had talked earlier about the book, don't sweat the small stuff because it's all small stuff. And when we learn how to practice that, then really we do let go of a lot of things. However, a lot don't. And if they're not addressed, the outcome could be pretty disastrous. Tend to think if we avoid it, don't deal with it, they'll go away. But, as we talk further today, that just doesn't happen. And so, that can be a mixed response for true and false depending upon the nature of the conflict. Minor, let's hope they go away. Major ones definitely need our time and attention. Because, let's get to number 4. Conflicts only impact the disputing parties. True or false? And I'm seeing false with an exclamation point, and you are correct with that. Right? When there is a conflict or when communication breaks down, it affects everybody. And it could create residual damage, throughout an organization so quickly, and throughout a team that they really do need to be addressed. How we address them is what's really key. So let's get to number 5. Resolving employee conflict is management's responsibility. True or false? I'm seeing several people on the line here. Could be true, could be false, depending on the conflict. Who initially owns responsibility for solving a problem? Ourselves. Okay, ourselves, the original party. I mean, we own that. However, I also did see is that when they cannot do that, because some people, quite frankly, can't get out of their own way. And if they cannot do it themselves, what do you now need to do if you are the supervisor or the manager? You're right, Jan. Now you really do need to step in because we acknowledged earlier, all right, that when there is a conflict, when there is a difference, boy, when a relationship has broken down, that people need to work, need to work together, right? That it begins to affect the entire team. And they're going to be looking for you for some guidance about having, helping them work it out, as John says, because you cannot allow that to go on, right? But you would hope that they could take some ownership, in resolving it. But if they cannot resolve it, all right, now it becomes a business issue because it's affecting others. And so how we go about that, here's the how. Here's where emotional intelligence comes into play. We have to be able to find out really what the real issues are so that they can be solved. You're right, Cheryl. You help them find the middle ground and understand the real issues. Because people get angry, that's raw emotion. And when people get angry, many times they don't ever get down to what the real issues are. So let's get down to business here and see. And as we start with all this, a couple of things. Some of the words that we actually use have such a negative or strong connotation. If we say the word conflict, we get a variety of pictures in our mind. That can be a negative, can be a fight, can be a confrontation. However, if we start to change the word conflict to conversation, we need to have a conversation about it versus a confrontation. As John said, words are powerful. And the words begin, even with ourselves and our own self-talk. Instead of saying, I need to confront somebody about something, we have a conflict going on. If we reframe it to, I need to have a conversation with somebody about, I need to have a discussion with somebody about, then we have a better chance of approaching the dialogue in a more constructive way, or even making ourselves even have the conversation, because sometimes we don't even want to go there, right? But in a management role, guess what? You have to go there because you have responsibility for helping them resolve it. A responsibility not only for performance, technical performance, but you have responsibility for the behaviors associated with that performance. So let's right away begin to shake out conflict, to we have a problem. Problems are opportunities if we look at it constructively. We are not going to confront somebody, we're going to have a conversation with somebody. We're going to bring parties together for a discussion, not an argument. And so consequently, we're putting constructive words in our minds in the hopes that what we're already putting in our minds comes through in our behavior. It's how emotional intelligence begins to work in these situations. So constructive conflict, look at the good things that can come out of that. When there are differences and you let people brainstorm, we get some creativity, we get some innovation. Conflicts, problems, dilemmas that come up with our customers. As we resolve them, we can increase customer satisfaction, right? Do some things that are fun among the various teams within the libraries, right? It's a healthy competition, right, that comes out of it, but it's a fun one too, right? And conflict also allows you, constructive conflict, what can come out is a diversity of opinions, different perspectives. Look how boring it would be if we all thought the same way, all responded the same way. And so as we begin to put the word constructive into these situations, we create an atmosphere that almost draws people out to look at things in very unique ways or different ways. And as such, from a leadership perspective, you're creating an environment where people will come to you with all kinds of problems. And isn't that much better that they come to you before they turn into major crises so that you can begin to address the problems? And I think that's the goal. You don't only want people to tell you when things are great, and running smoothly. You want people to feel as comfortable coming to you when there are issues, when there are disagreements, when there are problems, so they can be addressed before they turn into something that can turn into a catastrophe or turn into a crisis. And when you have an atmosphere that is constructive, right, well then, let's solve some problems. Let's see what we can do about that. Yeah, we want to prevent some situations that can really become pretty messy, right? And the messier they become, the more residual damage they cause. So this is the healthy way, of stimulating, some critical thinking, some creativity, saying, if we had a problem with this customer, then how do we fix it so it doesn't happen to somebody else? It allows for some growth. On the other hand, the minute we put the word destructive in front of conflict, see how now all of our thoughts go down a negative road. And even in the words that are used here, there is a sense of negativity that comes out of them, because destructive conflict damages relationships. And boy, it's hard enough to get a good cohesive team together, but when you finally get it working and a situation occurs that absolutely destroys it, it's even harder to pull it back together again. And so relationship management is very critical, to team, to organizational success, and also just job satisfaction. Isn't it great when people get along, right? Then we almost want to do our jobs. If we walk in and every day we're faced with a personality or a style, that's not healthy for us, we almost don't want to show up. And that's the influence of people on people. So when conflict is not managed well, remember we said we hope people take ownership, but when they don't, and we need to step in, we do it to avoid all of these elements, all right, that really begin to build. Because then if we don't deal with customer problems, we got unhappy customers. Morale really drops. And as morale drops, I'll tell you right now, efficiency, effectiveness begins to drop, because why bother? Right, the dissension, you can feel it. You can feel it internally, and those coming in externally can also feel it. And who wants to spend time in that type of an atmosphere? Conflict that starts with words, unfortunately, can escalate. And as it escalates, it can turn into harassing behavior. And sad to say, those that are not very strong in their communication skills, many times will react and react physically, and that's how violence tends to occur in the workforce. In the workforce. And so you put all of this is all behavior, is going to have an end result, on productivity and efficiency and getting things done. So there is a big price that is paid when conflict is not managed and not managed appropriately. Do you agree? Yes, yes, and yes. So how do we go about it? Um, and so much of it really does begin, actually, everything in life begins with ourselves. And I wanted to introduce you to, if it would show up, here we go, you know, something that is called our self-management sequence, which aligns very, very closely with the core competencies of emotional intelligence. And this comes from the classic work of a gentleman by the name of Shad Helmstetter. And this was a paperback that I read years ago that I don't even know if it's still in print, but it's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And I always loved it because I think we have some of the best conversations with ourselves because we're always right in those conversations. But in reality, we certainly aren't. But the conversations that start with ourselves, and those dialogues have a real effect upon our external behaviors and our external communications. Cheryl, we listen to ourselves. And this is what's really key because what we have to listen to are the messages that we send ourselves. And this is where the direct effect upon these messages and our behavior come together. Because if we are not comfortable in dealing with a situation that we perceive to be difficult, and dealing with conflicts and disagreements, well, then the odds are we tend to pull back. And when we step into positions of responsibilities, we don't have the luxury of doing that because we're tasked, with keeping constructive relationships going on, within our teams, within our departments, within the libraries and organizations that we're affiliated with. So many times we have to learn how to do things differently. Where I see a lot of times is, and I don't know if this is relevant to those of you who are attending, but individuals who are stepping into new roles as supervisors or managers, and especially those that are promoted from within into a group, and they now have responsibility over a group where they were once a colleague, may have come in initially being opposite ends of the spectrums, either too nice because I was friends with everybody before, or too aggressive because I can't be friends with everybody anymore. And it takes a bit of learning to try to find your way and your style, right? That's a comfortable style that allows you to be friendly with everybody who directly report to you. Not necessarily friends, but balance that ability of business and caring, for the individuals, that you're working with. And so I wanted to explain this self-management sequence because I believe it truly influences, our behavior. And you'll see again the parallel with emotional intelligence. Because as our roles begin to shift, we still need to change our programming to the various roles that we have in life, personally and professionally. And our programming, starts pretty much at a very young age. In that these are messages that are sent to us, and these messages stay in our brains. So if we were ever told at some point by a teacher that we weren't good, or we weren't smart, or we could never do math, or we would never be a good writer, we remember that. And as we remember that, it begins to affect our beliefs about ourselves. And our beliefs about ourselves, whether we think something positive or we think something negative, tends to drive our attitude towards it. And our attitudes drive our feelings. And so if we're comfortable with going into a situation, we move forward with it. If we're not comfortable with it, we pull back. Remember I said emotion, the root of the word emotion is move, means to move. So if emotion, which are our feelings, are positive, we move forward. If our emotions, we have doubts about that, here's the self-talk saying, we're not good at this, we can't do that. Well, then, guess what? We pull back. Or if we're absolutely overwhelmed with not knowing what to do, we become paralyzed and do nothing. Well, all of those choices are not necessarily effective except for the ones about how do we move forward, right, and take action, which is our behavior, in addressing issues that really need to be addressed. So as we learn and get more comfortable in dealing with people and the interpersonal dynamics of people, right, we learn how to change our programming and our self-talk in order to change our behavior. So at times we need to step back and say, I can do this. I can resolve this dilemma. I can help people learn how to come together. I can go in and have this difficult conversation with my boss, and I can achieve a result. But we have to believe that in ourselves in order to come across as a credible leader to others. Because if we don't, right, it will manifest itself in our behavior, in our conversations, in our tone. Just was in a situation recently, and this was at a library, and this was a library in my travels in the north. And this was a library that has had some very, very difficult years, with budgets and freeholders and just everything. And I have worked with them off and on over the years as they've been able to have me come in and visit. And this last visit, they had a new director who was somebody who was promoted from within that everybody suggested take the position. And I thought, oh, this is good. They're finally getting to move forward. Things are happening. And yet, when I got there, I could tell and I could pick up an atmosphere, right away, that something wasn't right. And he pulled me aside and talked to me one-on-one and said, I don't know why I took this job. Everybody said, I should take this, and now I'm not getting support. There is resentment, and people are going behind my back now to the board, and everything is a mess, and I don't know what to do. Well, we had a long conversation, but the first part of it, was behavior. Even though he technically got the title for the role, never really stepped into the role. Body language was down, eyes were down, his whole demeanor was just beat up. And they were, because people will take advantage, of any situation they can take advantage of. Sad to say. So instead of coming, and a lot of it went back to his programming as we talked and I got to learn about his history and all this. His area of expertise was the technical area of expertise, and there he could shine. His area of expertise was not necessarily dealing with people. And management in the supervisory role, as we've talked about, you will spend more time dealing with people, advocating to the board, addressing interpersonal issues than you ever will going back to your area of expertise. So you could see how that programming that he had was working against him instead of for him. And so I do hope he becomes successful because he really wants to be, but there is a lot that he needs to learn and allow himself to learn behavior-wise, in order to be successful in the role. And that is just one situation I'm sharing with you, but I cannot tell you how many of those similar that I have met. So the basic message I give to you, if you want to be more effective in your roles, well then you need to change your program. To change your programming, you need to step back and think about these messages that you're sending to yourself, right? And take your self-talk and turn it into a more positive, constructive way and believe that you can do this. Now the challenge is, how do we go about doing that? So did you find any value to this message I'm giving to you about self-management? Absolutely. Yes, I'm so glad that's helpful because we are so guilty of creating drama in our brains. And with that drama, all right, that we can create, many times we avoid situations because we almost write out the ending before we ever even approach anybody. And here's Beth, I could see it. Yeah, and so with this drama and these messages and this whole conversation we have, you know, it really does stop us at times from moving forward. And so as we rewrite the play or rewrite the stories up there, right, we can get some better focus about what's the right way to approach things. So come to the next slide where you see Johari Window at the top. And in the last session, we began to talk a bit about this, and we will certainly go into this in a lot more depth in the coaching class session that we have. But the essence of this, as it relates to conflict resolution, is that with conflict resolution, usually there are blind spots between the parties. To give you, for those of you that weren't here last time, a little bit of a review. Johari Window comes from the work of Joseph Ingram and Harry Lupp, Joe and Harry, and that's how the name came about, to develop this model of communication that I love because it brings the complexities of communication and presents it in a very simplistic manner as though you're looking through 4 window panes. The goal is to have the window of public knowledge as the greater of the 4 windows. All right. However, realistically, we all have blind spots. These are thoughts and feelings that somebody has not told us about something that we've said or done. So consequently, we are blind to the effects of our words or actions on them. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you that window is what creates more trouble in a team or in a relationship than anything else. Somebody gets mad about something and they'll say they should know what they've done, and they stop talking to somebody. The other person remains clueless. They walk in one morning and say good morning and somebody's not talking to them. And it's like, what's their problem today? You go up to somebody and say, gee, what's going on? Nothing? Well, guess what? They're still blind. So when we're blind to something, what do? We not only do it that day, we do it the next day, we do it the third day, and now people really aren't talking to each other. Still don't know what the issue is. As we look at this, all right, we also have hidden areas. And a lot of this is if we don't necessarily have trust, or as we're building a team, people tend to keep things hidden until they really get a comfort level with people. And the unknown, you might say, it's not necessarily in our conscious level, it's more in our subconscious. So when somebody hits those trigger points, they tend to surface, at which point they become known. Well, when you open up that window of public knowledge, well, then we minimize the blind spots. Hidden areas don't necessarily stay hidden because the comfort factor is beginning to grow. And the unknown turns more into knowns, which makes it a whole lot easier to keep communication flowing. The byproduct of removing blind spots is feedback, constructive feedback. How can we fix something if we don't know what needs to be fixed? But the key is to everything, I keep saying emotional intelligence, it's how we open a blind spot, how we remove a blind spot. And different ways of doing this, you'll see the bullet points here. One is listen, and it's active listening. And if you remember, active listening means that all parties participate in the listening process. We get clarification, we verify to make sure we're on the same page. We're clear about the messages that we send. If it's on your end, start with I and avoid you. The minute you start with, well, you didn't do or you have, guess what? You are attacking. People are going to defend. Emotion rises. Everybody loses sight of the issue. And yet, how often inadvertently, do we tend to start conversations that way? But people cannot deny you your feelings because you own them. I have some concerns, I have some questions, I'm confused by. That's yours. Versus you're not clear, you make it all confusing. See the difference again in tone and presentation, which goes along with not only speaking with respect, but make sure your body language is respectful. Because you may say, I'm listening, but if you're there rolling your eyes, checking your watch, looking at the computer, are you really listening to what somebody has to say and being respectful for their issues and what they want to share with you? So all of these skills that we've just talked about, go into acting with emotional intelligence. And so as we do this, we now see how it affects our choice of behavior styles. And behavior is something that we learn. We're not born assertive. Uh, we learn how to become assertive and balance, conversations along and issues with the interpersonal. Right? It's not a given. That's lifelong learning in all of this. Right? So as we go into the various styles of conflict resolution, that are available to us, we're going to tie in, which align with our behavior choices too. So the process itself, and if you, again, look at it as a process, it's not a measure of who likes who doesn't like who. Put a process to it, you've given it some structure, and it becomes constructive. If you don't put a process to it, then everything becomes personalized. And now it's attack, defend. And the outcomes are never really very good. So this process, as basic as it can be, and really learn how to always separate emotion so that you can get to the logic piece to define the issue that's going to help you determine the approach, here's the how, that will lead to the cooperation necessary to generate a constructive outcome. Using this process, you're now having conversations with the parties involved, not confrontations. What do you think? Yeah, Cheryl, it is a much better way to proceed because you said the word forward. This is what gets people moving forward beyond where they're just drawing the line. Good visualization. All right, Sheena, let me explain it one more time. And just visualize this. That's why I did it as a graphic so you can put it in your mind. But your goal when it comes to conflict resolution, problem resolution, is to be able to define the issue, to determine the approach, which is the how, that's going to lead to gaining the cooperation needed to affect a constructive outcome. But the whole goal is to find out what's the real issue that needs to be discussed, not personalizing I versus you. The minute you personalize, you step away from the issue. Sheena, does that help? You're right. Conflicts could be so hard, and even earlier somebody said that's the finding the issue. Who was that? Jamie, where he said finding the issue is that's the hardest part of all this because what's happening, is when people personalize, they lose sight of really what the issues are, and so how can you fix something if you don't know what needs to be fixed? So let's move forward a little bit here. And as John says, I guess it's self-manage emotions. This is emotional intelligence. The approach piece of it is emotional intelligence. When you step back and you take that deep breath allows your emotions to recede. And as your emotions recede, your cognitive gets larger. And this is all physiologically happening. And as that grows in the front part of your brain, the issue begins to really surface. But while the emotions are raw, you can't really figure out what's going on or what the real problem is. And when we don't know that, all right, well then, I don't know if we're really ready to have that conversation because the outcome is not going to be a very good outcome. This is probably one of the hardest elements of communication for us to learn as individuals because we are so emotion based. But boy, if you can learn how to control this, then it will serve you well in life, personally and professionally, in just about any circumstance that you find yourself in. All right. Looks like we're getting some feedback. I see some people typing. Let's hear what your comments are so far before we get into the various styles. Yeah, the ability to control the emotion, to count to 10. Oh, what was the other tip that I gave you all? Anybody remember? Especially if you see that difficult person and that trigger point's being pushed. Other than taking a deep breath, what was the other one of my favorites to do? Okay. Here is a little tip. Especially if you're going into a meeting and let's say you're going to try to mediate a discussion or you're going into that board and there's that difficult personality that's there and that are always there, or here comes that customer whereby you never do anything right, but boy, they're there every day, is that before you respond, then always go into a meeting or have handy a bottle of water, whatever it is you drink, and make sure it's whatever you can drink that's legal to the situation you can bring in. And before you respond, take a drink of water. Take a drink from your cup, because that is your version of taking a deep breath. And while you are drinking, you cannot talk. Can you get the other person to drink too? I guess it depends what you put in that drink. But when you do that, right, it allows, right, that raw emotion physiologically to receive, and it gives you just those couple of moments, right, to get your thoughts together so you have a better chance of responding in a more constructive way. And so that is one of my favorites. I was in a session last week and there was a very interesting character in it. No, I guess it was this week. And earlier this week, and great guy, fun, but let's put it this way, very diverse or distinct opinions on things. And we were taught, it was a class on negotiation, and I gave everybody the tip about drinking, and about 2 or 3 hours into the class, somebody said, "You need another bottle of water." So as fun as it was, I must tell you that ability to kind of step back and take a deep breath before responding and drinking the water worked even better, because nobody had any idea except that I had shared the tip with everybody in the hopes that it would help them too. But you learn to laugh along with it, and as you do that, it just gives you a good sense. And especially when you're in a tough situation, Cheryl, is that a lot of times one of the best things to do is to get everybody to take a break and walk away for a couple moments when you can. If you don't have the luxury of 15 minutes and you're looking at minutes here, that deep breath, take a drink of water, just allows you to refocus. And that's what you're trying to do so that you can really get to what the issue is. So let's look at our approaches here. Right, what was the process? Let's get the issue here. Right now, let's look at our choices, and approaches and styles that we can employ. Because for all of these, depending upon what book you read, you may see them labeled differently, but the majority are going to come down to this. We have the different styles are avoiding, accommodating, and in the middle we have compromising. On the very strong side with very high assertiveness, almost to the point of aggressive behavior. You see that forcing, controlling style, but very high assertive, but true assertive. You're going to see the collaborating, problem-solving style. So, on the spectrum here, right, there are advantages and disadvantages to each of them, and that's what we're going to work our way through now. So please follow along on the slides, because the avoiding style, for many times, it's our first choice, because who in the world wants to deal with tough conversation? I mean, we're all human. Most of us would rather not. But we've already acknowledged no good comes from that. However, there are times where it can work to a benefit. And you can see if something really has no value or is unimportant, there's where don't sweat the small stuff comes in. Let it go. Uh, if the timing is not right, like it really needs to be addressed and all you have is 5 minutes, well then, and you could put it off, well then certainly put it off. If everybody is very hot under the collar, well then that's not the time to have a constructive conversation because it's all going to be emotion and nobody's going to address what the issues are going to be. Uh, and also, I'm going to add another one here because let's go back to you as the individual. If you really have a day where you're not feeling well and physically it affects you, if your physical health affects your mental capacity and it also affects your emotional capacity. And if you're not up to it, that's not the day to go into a tough conversation. So if you can avoid having it that day, then by all means postpone it for a day or two because you are just not going to be sharp. If you cannot do that, well, then you're going to have to do a little bit more work behind the scenes in writing down your thoughts and helping maintain your focus because physically you're not going to be at your best. So always think about, and maybe that goes along with timing, when's the best time to address this? But be fair to yourself too. You know, the disadvantage to avoiding is that when you have something important that needs to be discussed, you know what, you need to do it. You cannot avoid it because the longer you avoid it, it's going to continue to grow. And closing a door on it is only going to make the elephant come out at some point, and that elephant in the room continues to get bigger and bigger, and many times with disastrous consequences. So avoiding, yeah, it might be our first choice. We tend to think it's the easiest choice. It's definitely not the best choice in most situations. Let's look at next one. Okay, and again, these are where you might say these are more low in assertiveness. At that level. All right, you'll see more non-assertive behavior or comfort with non-assertive, you hear it referred, passive behavior, tend to go these two first. Now, accommodating is more like giving in because it's easier to do that. Now, having said that, there are times where there's an advantage to accommodate. If something is not really important to you, but is so very important to the other person, you know what? Let them have it. An example. If, let's say you're going to paint your office, or they're painting the interior of the building, and you're on the committee to pick the color, and somebody is going to just, I don't know, they're just going to die if they don't have Sahara sand. And you don't really care as long as it's a neutral color. Let them have the Sahara sand. Because when you're now on the committee that needs to pick the upgrade to the computer system, basically what are you doing? You're remembering those points here. All right, you're kind of building that. All right, in the hopes that you can get them, sway them, all right, to see the advantage of system X versus system Y. So there are times where it's worthwhile. Biggest disadvantage to use accommodating as a preferred style is that at times, you know what? You're showing that you're more willing to lose than win when we look at win-lose factors. Right? And the more that you give in, you start to resent other people. Resentment starts to build up. And so it's not healthy. And you may miss the opportunity, when people are ready and willing to deal with the issue, and you're just still giving in because you think it's easier. So accommodating can work for you, accommodating can work against you. And you have to decide the situation where it does make sense, to employ that style. Has anybody had a situation where it's been advantageous to accommodate that you could share? Let's see. It looks like Beth is bringing one up here. You've been asked but forcefully to loan the library for social events. When you have accommodated, what is the payback that you get? And it doesn't happen too frequently, all right? But what's the benefit of accommodating the requests? Even though it seems that the requests may have been made a little bit forcefully. But you do. You get a higher profile on campus. There's visibility. You bring people into the library that maybe has not been in the library before. So it's wise to do it for the right situation. It may not be wise to do it all of the time. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum here, from avoiding and accommodating, which are more non-assertive approaches, right? All of a sudden, here we go. Let's just jump up to the top here, which is definitely your aggressive behavior. All right, the style of forcing, controlling is definitely a very, very strong behavior style. Because those who are aggressive want to force their way onto you, they don't really care about your needs. They just want to win. So if we go back to the win-lose factors, right, they want to win at the expense of somebody else, and they actually enjoy seeing you lose. So it's not a healthy way of managing conflicts or situations. However, there are times there is an advantage to it. But to me, you could still be nice regardless of how you do it. If there is an emergency, there's not a lot of time for discussion. Sometimes you just have to give the order and it has to be done. The time piece, time constraints, right? Leaders, by your authority, you have to make decisions, and you need to make decisions quickly. And again, they may not necessarily be popular. They may not allow time for input or involvement, and they need to be followed by measure of your authority. However, when we look at, but you still have, and this is what I always say, that you still have the ability to express the decisions, express the issues in a constructive way. There's the how. Right. Disadvantage, if you're always defaulting to forcing, controlling a very aggressive style, right, you're not giving anybody any opportunity to give some input, feel like they're a part of the process. You're creating an environment that's a very negative environment. You hear this called the dictatorial environment. And it could result in a lot of disruptions in the workforce because people will just do what you tell them to do. All right, and now you're losing, all of that knowledge that people have, experience or opinions or insight that they can give to you. Aggressive behavior turns people off. And even that forcing, controlling, my way or the highway, right, when it comes to resolution, I don't know if you ever truly get resolution. People will do what they have to do because they have to do it. But I don't know if you necessarily get the commitment and the buy-in that you really want long term, from the individuals involved. So we're seeing this as, again, advantages, disadvantages, not a preferred style for most of the time. That kind of brings us to our compromising in the middle here. We've looked at two non-assertives, and passive behaviors with avoiding and accommodating, very aggressive behavior, or forcing, controlling could be very high assertive if managed appropriately to the situation. But compromise is bringing us into more of a balancing from a high passive into assertive behavior. And here is, you might say it's everybody's willing to meet in the halfway. Everybody wins a little, everybody loses a little. When you have flexibility to give, and you know what, there's an advantage for that. Remember I said, win a little, lose a little. However, compromise is not necessarily the best approach, right? When in that giving up of parties, the solution still is not a very effective solution. When there is doubt that everybody's going to follow through, I don't know how long the compromise is going to last. When both parties are committed, and have equally important goals, then you know what, kind of works. When resources are limited, it's going to work for you, right? However, you have to look at the whole situation, all right, to see, is this really the best approach, or is there still another way? Do we need to be in the middle ground? Or do we really need to focus on total, a complete resolution of what the problem is? Right? And that's what leads us, to the fifth style, which is truly an assertive, respectful approach to conflict resolution and problem solving. And that's why it's called the collaborating style. And this is when all parties come together, right, to achieve what's called the win-win. This is when focus is on the issue, focus is on problem resolution, and the individual needs are put aside in order to come up with a solution that is best for all. Right? The advantage of using this approach is that when you have the time to do it and the parties are committed to working together, oh my gosh, the outcome is so much more constructive. The challenge or the disadvantage of time is when you don't have a whole lot of time, when the parties are not committed to resolution, when the individuals involved really don't have the ability to facilitate the conversations towards an outcome. This is the skill of really issue-focused resolution. And that is a skill set. But this is the one that we learn. This is how we learn assertive behavior. This is how we learn how to respect everybody's opinions and perspectives and take the best of it all in order to come up to a resolution. So as you can see, there's advantages and disadvantages to all, but this one is the one that we strive to employ in the majority of circumstances. Now, how do we do that? Think about the process. We have the styles, the steps we put in. It kind of sums up everything we've been talking about. Before we get into that, you take that deep breath, take that drink of water. Get the emotions to recede. Don't take it personally. We have a problem. And as we look at it from that perspective, it's not about you, it's not about me, we have an issue here. And even behavior, right, especially as we talk in that coaching situation, as we spend a lot of time on behavior, because that's a very tough one. Turn it right back to the effects of the behavior on the performance. Don't take it personally. Make sure you clarify and get agreement from all parties what the actual problem is. Don't put your effort into solving a problem if that's not the problem that needs to be addressed. You do that by asking a lot of open questions. If you ask a lot of questions, listen to it, because what you're really trying to do is really get, earlier somebody said the hardest part is trying to figure out what the real issue is. This is the hardest part of this. Now, what are some of the causes? What's contributed to this? What's it going to take to fix it? And so in the solutions and ideas that come up, well then, evaluate them. What can we do? Can't do everything that everybody wants, but what can you do? From that, what's the action plan? Yeah, and so in the action plan, what are we going to do first, second, or third? What do we have commitment through? And so as we follow through on that, here's where your feedback, your monitoring comes in to make sure everybody stays on course. And if they do, then you have to assess the results. Did we really solve the problem? And if we didn't, we have to go back and revisit and see what do we still have to do. So this whole arena, of conflict resolution, problem resolution, really is the assessment, of what are the issues, what are the problems, what are the styles we can employ, which is our approach. And all of that comes together to say, how do we get people to cooperate, get on the same page so that we can affect a constructive outcome. At the end of the day, not everybody is going to be happy at times. But if we can get agreement to work together, right, for resolution, then we've really made a lot of progress. And so we want to make sure that people continue. I mean, that's always the challenge, to keep people moving forward. So tell me, what do you think so far? Has this been helpful? All right, because then we're going to put it into a situation. Good, good. I'm seeing it's helpful. Yeah, this is, like I said, this is conflict resolution, problem resolution, difficult conversations. Boy, they are probably one of the hardest elements, in the entire communication cycle. All right, but You know what? They're a necessary part of life. And as Cheryl says, in the process of hiring 2 new employees, as we start to learn who our audience is, and begin to see the personalities, we start to see what's the right approaches to take to them so that we can engender cooperation, we can help them be successful, because that's really the goal. We want everybody to be successful. And as they are, guess what? We are, in that process. So let's take a look. I always try to bring in a situation or two, in our webinars. And in the classroom, we'll put a bunch more of these in. And for anybody who is coming to the class one, please bring real life situations in, because I'd like you to go with some valid approaches to take back and apply, when you go back to the work, to your workplace. Okay, in this one, all right, the first situation. You have a member of your team performs his job well, but in the process complains constantly. And let me tell you, the complainer and the negativist, two styles of difficult people, are everywhere. However, it's beginning to affect others. How are you going to discuss his need for improvement in this area? Technically, he can do the job, but behavior-wise is creating some problems. Cheryl says, ask him to come up with some solutions. The challenge with that is he may not think he's being negative. A lot of times people don't own their behavior. Okay, we see what the problem is. Let's see, I see here, could you focus on the aspects of his behavior you do like and ask for more of that? You can. Here's David, may depend on the situation. Yeah, everything's going to be situational. If somebody was always very positive, let's look at it from two perspectives. If somebody was always very positive and a good team player, and then now, and there's a shift in behavior to negative, the odds are something is going on behind the scenes. If somebody comes in and seems to be consistently complaining, negative, and not taking any ownership for all of that, well, now you have a performance issue, and it's a performance issue tied in with behavior. And, first part is really, what are the issues? It's an observation. Remember, you can only deal with fact. So if others are coming to you to complain, my suggestion is be visible, see for yourself, what the behavior is. Because the last thing you want to do is say, so-and-so said to me that. You're going to walk down a very dangerous road in doing that. But you have some concerns about the complaints, that he's been expressing. And with the complainer, one of the best things to do is separate the complaints. Try to see what the validity of them are. In other words, why is he even surfacing them? And somebody earlier said, let's see what the solution could be. How do you think it could be handled differently? What would you do if you were in my shoes? And believe it or not, we tend to think people know when they're being negative, or they do not know how they're being perceived by others. That's a blind spot. And your ability to tell them in a very constructive way, the effect that it is having, in creating an atmosphere, right, that's not a comfortable atmosphere, many times is the wake-up call that people need to hear. Because even though it may be obvious to you, it could be blind to them. Yeah. As Jan said, once it's brought to their attention, the discussion started. People don't know how to change behavior until they know that they even need to do it. And the behavior situations can be a little bit tough, but from your perspective, tie it into performance and the effect that it's having on the team. And if there's a complaint, take the aspect, gee, do we have a problem with? If so, how can we approach this? Now it's constructive. And if the individual who is complaining and is so negative is part of the solution or made a part of the process, you might be able to minimize their negativity. But remember too, you can't change other people. It's going to be their choice, to approach a little bit different. And Cheryl's right, they have to care enough to want to change. They may not. And if not, well, then you're going to need to start stepping back, right, and think about a corrective action, because negativity as behavior can have as much effect upon performance as somebody not doing the technical aspects of their job. And now it becomes a team issue, and it becomes an individual behavior performance issue. There's your issue. Now let's go to the second situation and look at it from a different perspective, because remember, you're in the middle of both of these. All right, there's your leading from the middle. You have a manager wants a procedure done a certain way. You think your approach is more effective. What are you going to say to get your message across to her? What approach are you going to take here? Because again, you're trying to get cooperation and have her listen to an alternate viewpoint. See, you're typing away. Okay, here's Cheryl. Try to show her the advantage of doing it another way. Express what you want to do and ask them to review it when you are done. Okay, I see this, and have a conversation, not a confrontation. Good, Jamie. And let's see, let me take another one here. Present that the approach that you have in mind might help achieve the goal that we all want. And here's key. Presentation is going to be critical here, because you don't ever want to go back to somebody and say, this isn't going to work, I don't like that. You're starting off with you. Because all individuals, regardless of what title or what level that they're in, will step back and they will defend their idea. It's human nature. Remember, you attack, I'm going to defend. Right. Your goal, always think about what do you want to achieve from the conversation. Your goal is to get him or her, to at least hear you out, look at the alternative, and see, and at least consider your approach. So the last thing you want to do is say, that's not going to work, or that's not valid, and it's not, because now they're never going to hear you. Right. So as you're thinking, separating what's the real issue that you have, and several of you had here, you begin to look at, you can approach by expressing your concerns about the procedure that they want to implement, either based on previous history or what we've done or circumstances that you have here. The word concern is not threatening, and it should open up some conversation. You have some other approaches or options you would like to have considered, right? Not that you want to do, but you'd like to have them considered. You can also suggest a trial period. We have two different approaches. Can we put it in as a pilot, as a trial, so that we can evaluate to see which works better, all right, to help us achieve our goal. And she said we want to be able to achieve the goal. So if you notice the tone that I'm trying to give to you, it's not ever nullifying or invalidating the idea of procedure, but it's showing that you've given some thought to it. And after you've given it some thought, all right, you have some concerns, you have some ideas, you have some approaches, in the hopes, all right, that it would work better. If you take them all into consideration, the approach may be a little bit more effective towards achieving the goal. No guarantees, all right, that you're going to get your way, but hopefully it will go towards a constructive conversation so that at least the ears are open to maybe further discussion. And that's really what you want to do, right? You're really first step in just about anything, is to be heard. And once you're heard, then you can go down a lot of different roads. But you have to be heard, and your approach about the issue is what's going to drive your foot in that door. And then once you get in that door, it's up to you what you're going to do. But your biggest challenge is to get your foot in the door and get people to listen, get them to listen, you get them to think, then you begin to help direct them towards your point of view. Because really, at the end of the day, in this, everybody cares about each other, right? We're not necessarily in any organization to fight or be territorial. Even that might be a part of our human connection and condition, a bit about what we're wired, but we learn how to put that in the back of our brains. There was a great, and this is a quote that I wanted to kind of wrap up with today. And I really liked it, from a book that I was reading. And it says, the law of win-win says, let's not do it your way or my way. Let's do it the best way. Isn't that great? And if we look at it from, let's do it the best way, right? We're all taking some ownership of this. We're all trying some different things, right? We're all kind of working together to make that happen. And when we keep that as our mantra, we really are creating an atmosphere and environment where we're valuing, everybody, we're valuing the people and the resources that we have. I truly believe respect as the foundation allows everything else to work a little bit more easily. So our goal is to treat everyone with respect. Everyone in an organization. Get to know everybody in an organization because every individual contributes to its success. Recognize people and names and talk to everybody. And the more that you do that, the more people are willing to meet you. And so that as situations come up, people are willing to work with you, right, to come to some sort of resolution, especially as you're crossing departments or teams or things of that nature. So I truly hope that today's session, on conflict resolution, problem resolution, gave you some insight about how to handle that element of communication a little bit more comfortably, right? Because it really is the one thing that, oh gosh, we spend a long time learning, and every day we learn. And there are some situations that even at the end of the conversations, we may shake our head and say, still could have done a little bit better with that. But the very fact that afterwards we say that, that's the learning process kicking in, right? Which says that, as we come into our own, we're getting a lot more comfortable and effective in handling the interpersonal dynamics, of dealing with people, which is a big, big essence of successfully supervising people. So what I would like to, I always say to you, here are some references, and some of these are tried and true. And you could see that I'm a fan of some of the classics. There's a lot of new writing out there, and actually I am looking for some new books. So you all are in the library, you're surrounded by this, so if you have some new titles that relate to successfully supervising people or leadership that I haven't referenced in the sessions, would you please send me an email? The last slide has my email address, because it is time, I think, to take a look at my library, refresh the library, and I would love your insight on that. But some of the classics on here that are still very much used today in negotiation. I teach negotiation. I'm also an arbitrator with the Florida State Attorney General's office, and the book of Getting to Yes and Getting Past No, are still part of this training because they give a very strong foundation, in trying to help people come to that ground, where they see a constructive resolution to whatever the issues or the problems are. Another one, it's a little one, but I always liked it because it just kind of was a very practical approach. It's called Conflict Happens, and this comes from the Walk the Talk company in their series. Classic one that goes along with all of the ones on handling difficult people is difficult conversations. Remember I said, if we're not comfortable or perceive it to be difficult, we'll do our best to avoid and pull back. And it doesn't serve us well in the long time, in the long term. And then finally, the one I referenced earlier in our time today, it's called Primal Leadership, by Daniel Goleman, right? And it really does say that emotional intelligence is the first of the leadership skills because it's going to have a direct effect upon everything else in getting people to move forward, to work with you, to follow your vision, and to meet expectations. So I certainly hope, as I see our time coming to a close here today, that you have enjoyed our webinar series. I have had a grand time working with you all, and I am so looking forward to hopefully meeting you all in person, where we can have a bit of fun with the learning, um, have some good conversations, complete some exercises, and ask that you come be prepared, bring some relevant situations and case studies to the table as it comes to coaching individuals to achieve positive incomes. Thank you, everybody, for giving me the privilege of working with you throughout this series. And a special thank you to Aaron and to Connie. Aaron for his introductions and his coordination, and to Connie, for her wonderful interpretation skills throughout.
Thank you.
And thank you, Claudia, for a wonderful webinar. We were very lucky to have been able to participate in this learning opportunity. Some great information and a sneak peek of what is coming up. Attendees, I'd like to reiterate that to sign up for the wrap-up workshop, Successfully Supervising People, Coaching for Positive Outcomes, on Wednesday, March 2nd, here at the Swiftland office. Also, be sure to sign up for the next webinar of Swiftland's Diversity Discovery Institute Year 2, E is for Evaluating, this Friday, February 19th. That is a date change from the original calendar, so it is this Friday, February 19th. And it is a lunch and learn, and it will be from 11 to 12:30. We encourage you to look at all our upcoming webinars and workshops in the months ahead, and we hope you're all able to join us for at least 5, if not all, future training opportunities. Please feel free to keep checking our calendar on our website, the Florida statewide calendar, our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, or look for your message from the Florida Library listserv. Thank you and have a wonderful day and a wonderful upcoming weekend, hopefully. And thank you, Connie, for a wonderful job as always.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay. Yay. You've made